Order. Before I call the Honourable Member for North Down to move the motion, can I inform members that the Parliamentary Digital Communications Team will be conducting secondary filming over there during today's debate. Alice Easton to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I move the motion that this House considers UK-wide policing funding and the PSNI. Mr. Chairman, on the importance of police funding across our United Kingdom, I wish I could present a more optimistic picture to the House. Unfortunately, that is not the case. No discussion on policing should overlook the contributions of Sir Robert Peel, the founding father of modern policing. Although we have made significant progress since the establishment of the Metropolitan Police Service in London in September 1829, there remains critical challenges which we must address. I fear without adequate funding, we are in a danger of regressing. The significance of police funding cannot be overstated, particularly when we consider the Peel principles which emphasise the presentation of crime and the maintenance of public order. These principles remind us that the true measure of policing effectiveness lies not in the visible presence of police officers, but rather in the absence of crime and disorder. To uphold these ideals, adequate funding is essential to ensure that our police service can effectively serve and protect their communities. So where do we stand? I will begin with the overview of the United Kingdom, focusing specifically on the Police Service of Northern Ireland. It is with deep gratitude that I represent North Down in this House, though it pains me to acknowledge that my constituency lacks a fully operational full-time police station that is open to the police and to the public. Not one member of the public can report a crime in a police station in my constituency because they're not open. It is, and according to Eurostat, we can compare international policing strength with England and Wales, which are ranked 29th, Scotland at 23rd and Northern Ireland at 16th. As of March the 31st, 2024, our police force stands at 175,000 equivalent police officers. While this marks a 10% increase from 2003, when the Home Office first began its recordings of these figures, it still represents a 0.7% decline from the peak numbers strength of 2010. In Scotland, there are 16,536 full-time equivalent officers, with a 2% lower than last year and a 7% lower than the peak number recorded in 2013. As I come to Northern Ireland, I will pause as we are in the season of remembrance and take a moment to honour those across the UK who have made the ultimate sacrifice in police service for us all. I pay tribute to the 300 members of the Royal Irish Constabulary, following on from the Belfast Police in 1836, who lost their lives. The 310 officers of the Royal Ulster Constabulary deservedly awarded the George Cross, along with their 370 gallantry awards and 712 awards for distinguished service. And we remember the 16 members of the Police Service of Northern Ireland who have been killed in the line of duty. It is with deep concern that I must place on record the fact that the Police Service of Northern Ireland has been underfunded since 2010. While the Northern Ireland Block Grant has increased by nearly 50% in 2010-11 financial year, reaching approximately £4.2 billion for this financial year, the police budget has unfortunately decreased from £903 million to £892 million. To put this in perspective, funding for health has increased by 89% in Northern Ireland, justice has increased by 8%, while policing has faced a 3% cut. Benjamin Franklin, a founder father of the United States, wisely noted, "If we fail to plan, we plan to fail." In the context of the Police Service of Northern Ireland, accurate planning reveals a significant need. £166 million in 2025-26, a further £235 million is needed in 26-27, and a further £307 million is needed in 27-28. Yes. Good way.
Sir Roger, can I congratulate the honourable gentleman for securing this important debate and for putting it forward as expertly as he is. When he acknowledges the projected pressures that police will face in the coming years, Does he recognise that the budget made no reference to the McLeod judgment, to the holiday pay issue, to legacy liability, or to the recent PSNI data breach, which amounts to some £750 million of unfunded pressures that are going to put even more difficulty on PSNI, the Department of Justice and the Northern Ireland Office?
Easton.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank the honourable member for his response there. And I totally agree that the amount of funding that the PSNI need to find is just, we can't even touch it with what we have. And he raises the most valuable points. This underscores the urgent requirement to address the ongoing issue of structural underfunding. I would like to acknowledge the £37 million in additional security funding allocated from the budget, as well as the investment in the Paramilitary Crime Task Force. While these measures are welcome, let me be unequivocal, they do not adequately address the underlying pressures facing our police service in Northern Ireland. Don Quixote reminds us that the truth of the pudding is in the eating. Let me now present to the House the stark truth of policing in Northern Ireland. Neighbourhood policing is diminishing. Response times for non-emergency calls are excessively prolonged. The capability for investigative crimes has been reduced. Inquiry offices are closing, and the ability of the police to support partner organisations is compromised. However, I am supported by listening to policing colleagues on the front line, committed to proposing solutions alongside dialogue on these challenges. A comprehensive approach to address these issues includes supporting the business case for maximising the police college, potentially over the next 3 years, aiming for 7,000 police officers, 2,572 staff by 2028. It is important to note that these figures remain significantly below the Patent Commission's recommendation of 7,500 police officers. The funding required for this initiative is £8 million in year 1, £25 million in year 2 and £47 million in year 3. To put it bluntly, any viable solution must be threefold. First, the monitoring round must address the £37 million funding gap. Secondly, there must be an increase in the budget baseline to establish sustainable funding. Finally, we need to have the approval of the business case to enable the recovery of police headcounts to previous levels. It is entirely appropriate for the Chief Constable of the Police Service to accurately highlight the current position, and he has my unwavering support along with that of many others. There is no doubt that the Justice Minister faces a crucial set of questions regarding the adequacy of the current budget allocation in the light of recent crime rates and increased public safety. Firstly, how can this budget be considered sufficient when community safety, recruitment and training, essential components for maintaining public trust and safety, are insufficiently prioritised? The current funding allocation leaves much to be desired, and as a result, the PSNI's ability to effectively serve the community is hindered. Furthermore, the limited resources allocated for community safety directly impacts the PSNI's ability to perform its duties. This raises the urgent need for accountability. An explanation is required as to why public safety is not being treated as a top priority, especially when the current funding does not reflect the crucial need. Sadly, it appears the voices of the public, the voices of the police unions, community leaders and political parties, all calling for adequate resources, are not being heard sufficiently either by the Department of Justice or by the Minister. So I challenge them to be open to a comprehensive review of policing budgets. This is essential to ensure that the PSNI's mandate, but I must be honest and place on record today they have fallen short in this regard. It is unsustainable to have only approximately 4,500 deployed officers in Northern Ireland. The reality we face is that the PSNI loses around 40 officers each month due to retirements and departures, while the number of graduate officers fails to keep pace with this attrition.
Member Giveaway?
Yes, Giveaway.
I thank the member for giving way and congratulate him on the debate. Just when he's on the issue of insufficient numbers, would he agree with me that we had the perfect example of that earlier in the year when the Chief Constable had to apply to Police Scotland to try and get personnel from Scotland to Northern Ireland, because potentially there was the very real risk that there could have been a massive increase in violence and he had insufficient officers to deal with it?
I would thank the honourable member for his points, and he's right. The recruitment levels have got so bad that the fact that we're having to go to Scotland to get extra police to make up for the shortfall in emergency situations is just not really acceptable. Northern Ireland is projected to have fewer than 6,000 officers by 2025 of this year, underscoring the need for urgent action. While I strongly welcome initiatives like Right Care, Right Person, which addresses the current mental health crisis in partnership with health and social care colleges, we must acknowledge that PSNI officers often become the first and last resort for many individuals in crisis. Now let us consider the broader context of national security. According to No Place to Hide, serious and organised crime strategy of 23 to 28, the cost of organised crime is estimated to be £47 billion. In Northern Ireland, where approximately one-third of organised crime groups have links to paramilitary organisations, this is particularly concerning. It is alarming to note that 30% of the PSNI Investigative's organised crime unit is dedicated to tackling these paramilitary gangs. Furthermore, the impact of paramilitarism is felt widely, with 40% of adults and 45% of our young people in Northern Ireland affected by their presence. In conclusion, adequately resourcing our police across the United Kingdom is essential for maintaining effective law and order, ensuring that appropriate enforcement of the law, safeguarding community safety and supporting the overall functions of the justice system. We ask our officers to perform a challenging task, often running towards danger while others move away. They desire a fair allocation of resources that enhances their ability to serve and protect the United Kingdom effectively. This need is particularly pronounced in Northern Ireland, where the challenges are unique and significant. Together, we can work towards ensuring a robust and effective police service, and where our police officers are aware of the respect that they are rightly held in, not least in the provision of financial resources to match the immense challenges that they face. Thank you, Chairman.
The question is, this House has considered funding for policing. Could those members wishing to contribute please just stand up? I want to see who is. Right. I'm going to put a time limit of 6 minutes on each speech in that case. We've got 4 of you certainly who want to get in, and we need to hit the wind-up speeches at about 5:05. Right, please.
Thank you, Sir Efford, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for North Down on securing this debate. And while his focus is, of course, on the PSNI, these general issues of policing are ones that are echoed across our United Kingdom, and I hope to raise some of the issues that are affecting my constituents. Last week, in my constituency, we had a fire started in Marton. We had in Gisborough shop fronts smashed. We had a pharmacy broken into, its contents burglarised, its staff assaulted. And these incidents, while our police officers responded to each of them, while arrests have been made, these are not individual isolated incidents. This is a pattern, this is a picture of crime across the country. It is a picture of criminals who feel emboldened and residents who feel unsafe. I'm grateful to the Policing Minister for taking the time to meet with me to discuss the issue of police funding in Cleveland, where I represent. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to raise these issues here as well. Because this is what people are dealing with every single day. People feel afraid to leave the house. People don't feel safe in their communities. They don't feel confident that when they call the police will come, or that when they report crimes will be investigated. They don't feel confident that the courts will see justice done, certainly not timely justice. And so this is why we need a change. And in my part of the world, in Cleveland, we've seen major cuts to our police force. We've lost net over 200 officers since 2010, a 12% reduction in full-time equivalent officers. All the while, demand has gone up. And while our officers work incredibly hard under extraordinary pressure, when they do make those arrests, what we see is a criminal justice system, a broader criminal justice system, which is creaking at the seams. So the charge rate, the prosecution rates are down. They've fallen over the last decade. Victims are waiting months and even years for cases to come to trial. Judges have been advised to delay sentencing because of the lack of prison capacity. It is a system that is in crisis and has been allowed to get to this point over years. Systematic underfunding and lack of support, which is why investment is so crucial in our criminal justice system. And that investment has to come at all stages of the system. It has to come at 4 stages. So it has to come into our prison estate, and I really welcome the investment we saw in the budget last week at £2.3 billion to expand our prison capacity to ensure we do have the prison places that we need. It needs to come into bringing down that court backlog so that cases are brought forward in a timely fashion and victims feel that justice will be served. And we need to see investment in visible community policing again. This is what residents desperately want. A named officer for every community who understands their village or their town, who knows the families that are involved, who knows the history that are involved, and can tackle these issues before they escalate. This was the cornerstone of the consent-based model of British policing for decades, and it has been eroded in recent years. It must be restored. And we also need to see investment in prevention. The last Labour government famously was tough on crime and also tough on the causes of crime, with funding for Sure Start and targeted schemes like the Safer Schools partnerships and the Family Intervention project. That is what this new Labour government needs to do as well. When I was in local government, we invested heavily in setting up a specialist team to tackle the exploitation of vulnerable children and young people by organised criminal gangs. It was about getting upstream of the process and making sure that those vulnerable children were diverted, saving costs to the state in the long term and also saving their opportunities into the future as well. That is the kind of ambition that this government needs to have, and I believe it will have. So we need to see that investment. We need to make sure our police have the resources they need to do their jobs, and we need to make sure that we're taking back our streets and making our streets safe again. Thank you.
Colin Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate today, and can I commend my honourable friend from North Down on his first Westminster Hall debate and commend him for his efforts. I agree with much of what he has spoken of today, and members will forgive me for continuing to champion the needs of Northern Ireland and the uplift needed. This House is well aware that Northern Ireland is running at an estimated deficit of 37 million. We have numbers well below what is safe policing. Crime is on the increase, and it would be remiss of me as a female MP from Northern Ireland not to specifically raise the increased attacks on females in Northern Ireland, with 42 females having been killed in the last 8 years, making Northern Ireland the most lethal place in Europe for women. We look at the drugs, criminality, terrorism, changing crime patterns, especially the rise in cybercrime, placing additional demands on police resources. The recent PSNI-led investigation into online crimes by Alexander McCartney, which tragically involved hundreds of victims globally, illustrates the massive resources that complex cyber cases require. Traditional crimes are no longer a measure. Mr. Chairman, years of tight budgets have left officers facing even greater workloads, while pay has effectively fallen by 25% over the last decade. Low pay, increasing job pressures is driving officers to leave soon after completing training, a costly waste of resources, and in fact we have the highest figures of officers leaving after their 2-year probation. So retention is a major concern in Northern Ireland. But the exodus is not all about the money. Officers feel demoralised by slow, punitive disciplinary systems and the worry about being targeted unfairly. The situation is driving up sickness rates and early retirements due to mental health, further straining resources. PSNI is now grappling with record levels of sick leave and rising medical retirements, with nearly 800 officers off sick in a given day. There's also the issue of mission creep. As other public services have faced cuts, police are increasingly called on to fill the gaps, especially with mental health and social care. Officers in Northern Ireland and indeed across the UK spend a significant portion of their time in A&E. Demand from children's homes is high, with calls about children who miss curfew, a task that stretches resources and takes time away from core duties. So what am I getting at? I'm getting at the fact that policing budgets must reflect the wide array of duties that are now attached to policing in Northern Ireland. Whilst there are those in this place, although not present here today, whose party bemoaned the Chief Constable's ask of the Prime Minister for urgent monies, I want to say I support him, as do my colleagues on these benches, 100%. He does so knowing the crisis point we are at, and he does so because he resides over the crisis. Therefore, I support his asks and trust that the Minister is advocating for such with Treasury. There are some specific challenges faced by the Police Service of Northern Ireland that differ from England and Wales. Unlike police forces in other parts of the UK, PSNI doesn't receive local funding through a local precept, though we do acknowledge it does get a top-up to help address counter-terrorism threats. Also, unlike their counterparts in England, the PSNI lacks easy access to mutual support from neighbouring forces. When English forces need extra help, they can call on neighbouring teams, a very cost-effective and efficient solution. For the PSNI, mutual aid requires extensive planning, limiting flexibility in emergencies. So headcount must reflect this. Another urgent issue for the PSNI is the compensation bill related to the recent data breach and fines from the Information Commissioner's Office, which again will deeply impact already stretched budgets. It was bitterly disappointing that the policing in Northern Ireland didn't feature in the budget last week, but not surprising. UK policing, and we accept that this is right across the UK, faces a funding shortfall so deep it's not just about the money now and about more funding. It's about a thoughtful, strategic funding package. We need to rethink how to resource the police so that they can meet the needs, retain their officers, and focus on core responsibilities. Thank you.
Jim Allister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is no doubt that policing is in pretty dire straits in Northern Ireland, but it would be a mistake to simply say that it is all the fault of Westminster. Policing has been devolved to Northern Ireland since 2010. And if one compares the policing situation today with 2010, it is woefully below the level it then was in terms of police on the beat and provision of basic services. And we lament the lack of funding. But we have to face the fact that the Northern Ireland Executive has not prioritised police funding. As we've heard in this debate, when policing was devolved, the budget was £903 million. 12 years later, it was £892 million, which, of course, in real terms, is a massive reduction. And that is because the priorities of the Northern Ireland Executive were not those of policing, they were other things. So I think it is fair and important to recognise that the failings are not all on this side of the United Kingdom. Yes, there is a deficiency in funding. Yes, it is appalling that in the recent budget allocation there was nothing for the £142 million that's required for the data breach that the PSNI now has to face, that there was nothing for other special needs in that regard. But I think we do need to keep the perspective right in terms of that. And there is a responsibility on the Northern Ireland Executive to put its priorities in order, and policing should be a priority. I have a constituency, a large, essentially rural constituency. In the towns of Ballymoney, Ballycastle and all the villages that go around it, on any given night, you are lucky if there's one patrol car. You are lucky if on any given day there are 2, maybe 3 community officers covering a vast area. So there is a huge deficiency in need in that regard. And I do say to the government, they found extra money for the NIO, which essentially in large measure will be going to the Finucane inquiry, where once again we're going to pour tens of millions of pounds into an insatiable inquiry for a family which has never been capable of being satisfied and which previously rejected the very inquiry that they're now getting. So I do say to the government, it would be a far more prudent and appropriate use of funding to put the money where it is needed, and where it is needed is into the coffers of the PSNI. When we had the Patton report way back in 1998, etc., there was great hype and hope and expectation that policing was going to be wonderfully transformed. I think most people in Northern Ireland today would gladly go back to the exchange of the real effective policing of the RUC rather than the depleted policing of the PSNI. Because the numbers we were promised, 7,500 complement of police officers. We're 1,200 and more below that today. Patton has not been a success. It has not been delivered as promised. And policing in Northern Ireland has effectively gone from bad to worse. And we now have a situation where a hapless chief constable has to, almost cap in hand, come to the Prime Minister and say, can you help us? And for that, of course, he's criticised by the very local minister who's failed the police in terms of getting the funding that's needed, namely the Justice Minister. So I am anxious to promote in this House the genuine needs of policing within the context of recognising that there has to be responsibility also with the Northern Ireland Executive. And maybe the priorities of the Northern Ireland Executive are not uninfluenced by the fact that we have this bizarre situation where the PSNI is accountable to a Northern Ireland Policing Board, upon which sits a convicted terrorist, an organisation that murdered and butchered policemen for years. And that convicted terrorist, of course, is Jerry Kelly, who came to this city and bombed the Old Bailey. And he sits in lordship and control over the PSNI. That is not a healthy situation. And it's not a healthy control situation in terms of the PSNI. So when Patton produced that, when Westminster produced that, they didn't do policing any favours whatsoever. But now it is important to get adequate funding into policing and to ensure that if and when adequate funding is supplied, that the Stormont Executive spends it. Because we've had so many occasions when under Barnett consequential money has been given, for example, for childcare and other things, and spent on something else. There needs to be the proper spend of the money for the purposes for which it is given. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Roger, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I congratulate my colleague, the member for North Down, for bringing this debate. But, Sir Roger, I think it's interesting to note that the title in the order paper for this debate is actually Funding for Policing. And it is disappointing, I think, I'm sure for the sponsor, of the lack of either government opposition or other parties who have come to Westminster Hall today to actually debate the funding of policing across the United Kingdom. This wasn't a debate that solely focused on the PSNI, although that is where this debate has went because of the Northern Ireland influence here. And I think that's a testimony to Northern Ireland MPs in regards to how we value the service, the dedication of our police service across the United Kingdom. But Sir Roger, in the interests of this debate, and I note that it's a Northern Ireland Office Minister who has come to respond to a debate on the funding of police, and I, like others, will focus my comments in regards to the PSNI. And as has been pointed out by other speakers, the 6,300 officers that we currently have are at an unsustainable level. As my colleague from North Antrim has said, under Patton that was envisaged to be 7,500. But our current Chief Constable has actually said that in regards to the size of our population and need in Northern Ireland at this minute in time, he would expect to have a force of 8,500 to be able to do the job that he wants to do. So what we're actually looking at now in Northern Ireland is a case where we're actually asking our police service, our Chief Constable, to actually do more with less. And when it comes to the security and that reassurance of the people of Northern Ireland, that is going to lead to a recipe for disaster. And I think the member for Upper Bann has indicated where we are in regards to that position, where we have now women on our local media this morning saying they now feel unsafe walking the streets of Northern Ireland. Sir Roger, I think that is a shame and a disgrace that in this day and age, in any part of this United Kingdom, that we are now in a situation where we have women who are actually saying they feel unsafe walking the streets of what should be a first world country with a first world police service actually looking after the people who deserve that and expect that as well. So, Sir Roger, by the end of this year, it is expected that our police numbers will have fallen to 6,000 in Northern Ireland. And as the member for North Down has indicated, that's in the region of 4,500 who are going to be able to be actually deployed. So the purpose, I think, of this debate and this part of this focus is about looking at what more can be actually done, or the further challenges that our Chief Constable and the police and the policing board actually see in regards to how they deliver their service. And it has been referenced here, but I don't think widely understood, that policing in Northern Ireland got to that critical point where our Chief Constable actually took it upon himself to write to the Prime Minister, to seek the Prime Minister's direct intervention over the heads of the Justice Minister, the Policing Board, the Northern Ireland Assembly. Such was a situation that he felt so desperate about in protecting not just the back of his own officers, but the people of Northern Ireland, that he felt that was the direction that he needed to take. How was he rewarded? By a letter of chastisement from the Permanent Secretary of the Department of Justice. So for a Chief Constable who was dedicated to service and delivery to receive that level of how do you put it, that level of put down, which wasn't corrected or even challenged by the then Justice Minister, current Justice Minister, in regards to how she should actually have been stepping in my belief, to support our Chief Constable and the police and the Policing Board. Sir Roger, has been talked about the challenges of the PSNI, and I think there has been certain parts of it that haven't been perfect in regards to the data breach compensation claim that has been there. But there's also in regards to the additional pressures coming from a holiday pay claim as well. What is concerning on the back of the budget that has been announced in this place, yesterday in the Northern Ireland Assembly, the Finance Minister has said that His Majesty's Treasury is insisting that those payments come out of the Stormont budget. So how, as has already been referenced and talked about in regards to how our policing budget is being actually declined and challenged, I think I want to put on record, it has been mentioned here, about how health has increased by 60–80% over those last 13 years. So Roger, that's an unfair comparison when you take that any financial expert coming from the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council the whole way through will say that for health to stand still, it needs 6% year on year to simply stand still. And I think that's a recognised statistic. So to be able to, or for those who want to make that comparison about what health has received and compare it to what policing hasn't, because as the member of North Down actually indicated, Justice has received additional monies, and it should be then, in the way the structures of Northern Ireland work, up to how the Justice Minister actually works that out. But Sir Roger, what I would like to finish in concluding this debate is actually to pay tribute to our police and police personnel in Northern Ireland for the continued work that they do under those challenging situations in regards to what they go out day and daily, night and night. And there's a lot of criticism, and I recognise the comments from the member, but going back to that place where we had that name, constituency, locally recognised police officer. The majority of police officers want to be in that situation as well, and that's how we actually support them. So in closing, I want to play tribute, I think, to the Police Federation of Northern Ireland, particularly Liam Kelly, and how they have represented their officers to make sure that they fight at every opportunity we can. And I would hope that the rest of this House does likewise, Sir Roger.
Order. Order. Mr Shannon, I appreciate that you've been detained elsewhere with other business in the House, but we are playing beat the clock, so I'm not going to be able to call you. However, I will understand, and ordinarily, because you arrived so late, I wouldn't be able to allow you to intervene. But under these circumstances, if you choose to intervene on one of the front bench spokesmen, then I will allow you to do so. Mr Jones.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be under your chairmanship, Sir Roger, and I congratulate the honourable member for North Down for securing this debate. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their own home. They deserve to feel safe walking down their own streets. They deserve to feel safe on public transport and in their town centres. But for far too many people in the UK today, this is just simply not reality. The previous Conservative government failed to keep our communities safe from crime. The Conservatives' unnecessary cuts left our police forces overstretched, under-resourced and unable to focus on crimes that affect our communities the most. Every day, 6,000 cases are closed by the police across England and Wales without a suspect ever being identified. Meanwhile, just 6% of crimes reported to the police result in a suspect being charged. 3 in 4 burglaries and car thefts are going unsolved. And the Conservatives slashed the number of police community support officers by more than 4,500 since 2015. In my constituency of Wokingham, which is served by the Thames Valley Police Force, the largest non-metropolitan force in England and Wales, a police force that does incredible work, led selflessly by officers and civilian staff.
Mr Shannon.
Can I thank him for giving way and thank you, Mr Chairman, for giving me the chance to intervene. I appreciate it very much. I wanted to come along and support my honourable friend and colleague, the member for North Down, because the same police force, the same chief superintendent, the same constables, the same sergeants, the same police cars, all service his area as they do mine. The issues for us are very clearly antisocial behaviour, underage drug use, vandalism and petty crime, and also paramilitaries. Can I just ask the honourable gentleman, does he agree with me the importance of community officers and the knowledge that they have of their constituencies and their local areas is so important to ensure that the communities can gather behind the community forces, community police officers, and thereby address the issue of local crime?
Thank you very much. So, Roger, I absolutely do agree with you. Local police officers, BCSOs, really are very invaluable, and if they have a local connection...
Not just for my benefit, but for the benefit of Hansard.
Sorry.
Can the Honourable Gentleman speak into the microphone, otherwise nobody can hear him.
Yep. And if they have a connection with the local community, they do a really, really very, very good job. Thames Valley Police, they protect 2.5 million people and cover 196 miles of motorway, and I'm proud of the manner in which they serve our community. It is, however, a disgrace that their hard work is severely let down by the previous government's reckless mismanagement of police forces. In the Thames Valley, we have only 198 police officers per 100,000 people, below the national average of 245. We only have 88.1% of police officers in frontline roles, below the national average of 90.3%. And we only have 7 special constables per 100,000 people, below the national average of 10. This is a complete failure. And our police force, Thames Valley, need more resources, because the Conservative Party's dereliction of duty is evident in the consequences of their underinvestment. Between October 2021 and September 2024, retail crime has surged by 35.4%, from 10,306 cases to a massive 18,208 cases. Robberies have surged, with robbery of business property seeing a shocking 140.3% increase. In fact, within the Bracknell and Wokingham area, robbery of business property is a higher figure of 147.4%. Whether it is at the national level or local, our communities have been failed. I recognise that the government have inherited a mess, but they must urgently restore the proper community policing that people deserve. To do this, we must get more police officers out onto the street, which should be funded by scrapping the wasteful, expensive Police and Crime Commissioner experiment and investing the savings in frontline policing instead. This needs to address the dramatic cuts of PCSO numbers too. At the same time, we would free up existing officers' time to focus on local policing. That's why the Liberal Democrats are calling for a new national online crime agency that would take over things like online fraud and abuse, leaving more time for local forces to tackle burglaries and other neighbourhood crimes. For years, the previous Conservative government have failed to keep our communities safe from crime, and the government have said that they will act. So therefore I ask the Minister how and when they will deliver their manifesto promise of recruiting more neighbourhood officers. These details should be brought forward urgently. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Roger, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I congratulate the honourable member for North Down on securing this debate. I believe his first Westminster Hall debate, I hope of many. And I know that policing in Northern Ireland is a matter on which he has long campaigned hard, and I enjoyed his historical facts in his speech when he opened this debate. And I am also grateful for the contribution of all honourable members this afternoon, of which there were similar viewpoints, but also passionate viewpoints too. And clearly it's not for the operationally independent police service of Northern Ireland, PSNI, to make decisions about day-to-day policing in Northern Ireland. It is, of course, and for the Northern Ireland Executive, which I am proud that the Conservative government helped to restore earlier this year, to decide on how to allocate resources. Their being independent of this place does not mean, however, that we cannot harbour or express views about processes or individual decisions, and recognise the challenges of policing in Northern Ireland. And we note the commitment in the budget last week of £8 million for the executive programme on paramilitarism and organised crime, and this builds on the funding put in by the Conservative government to tackle that issue in Northern Ireland and strengthen community resilience. The Conservative government also made additional contributions to PSNI through the additional security funding, including £31.2 million for the financial year 23-24. The government had an explicit commitment in its manifesto to help improve public services in Northern Ireland. However, Sir Roger, I am worried by the comments from John Boucher, Chief Constable of PSNI, who has said that the programme for government does not reflect the pressures that PSNI are under, with policing numbers at an all-time low and further resources needed. So in her response, I would be grateful to the Minister if she would confirm to the House what further discussions she intends to have over the coming weeks and months with her counterparts in Northern Ireland about policing needs, and what steps will the government take to support the Executive and PSNI to increase police numbers to the level envisaged in the New Decade New Deal agreement, and to hit key milestones on the way there, as seems to be a common theme through speeches in this House. And according to the PSNI, all policing districts experienced a lower level of crime in the last 12 months. There were also fewer shootings, bombings and paramilitary-style attacks than during the same period. But just one of these appalling incidents is too many. And may I also join the honourable gentleman for North Down in paying tribute to the work of PSNI and all staff and all police officers in Northern Ireland and our security services for the daily job that they do. But it is important that the new government acts in such a way that supports the Northern Ireland Executive and law enforcement to help lock in a positive trajectory and address areas where progress is more challenging. There can be no return to the violence of the past, and I commend the invaluable work of the PSNI because they do face security threats every day, and they do an amazing job. And Northern Ireland has been a tremendous peace dividend of its own, with the progress that has come off the back of the Belfast and Good Friday Agreement. But with confusing messaging and short-term measures, this issue has not been a great start for the government, I would argue. Whether it be the city deals that were paused and then started again through a U-turn, or police funding levels, government must work with the executive on an equal footing. And I do fear, through announcements since this government has taken over, that the executive and ministers within that executive are not having solid and constructive messaging from this government, with U-turns and various policies changed at the last minute or U-turns coming forward. And I hope the Minister will reassure this House that in future there will be a much more constructive relationship with the executive when it comes to direct funding in various aspects of Northern Ireland matters and governance. The manner with which, as I said, the government has so far handled issues in relation to Northern Ireland has been rather abrupt, and that does need to change, become more stable and more consultative. We all want to see a safer, more prosperous Northern Ireland, with community cohesion moving only in the right direction and young people looking at a better future. Everybody in this House absolutely wants that to happen. But we must see commitments that were delivered at the last general election delivered for the people of Northern Ireland, and we must see policing take a much more of a front approach, not only from the UK government, but as the Honourable Gentleman and other honourable members in this House have said, must take a stronger approach from the executive itself. It's time that that has come. It is time that those drawbacks and those funding issues that have been outlined are delivered on, so that we can increase police numbers, make sure that crime continues to come down, and that policing is at the heart of all communities, as the Honourable Gentleman for Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland said in his community. He very cleverly outlined policing issues within his constituency, which he's absolutely right to do in this one United Kingdom, because his issues are the same as the issues that we have experienced and heard from constituencies in Northern Ireland. And I pay tribute for him for turning up to this debate. Like him, I also suddenly thought that it was a policing debate across the whole of the United Kingdom, and it should have been. But it's just that in today we are addressing predominantly Northern Ireland issues with PSNI. So to conclude, the Conservative Party will always back Northern Ireland, Sir Roger. Its integral place in our union and the aspirations and the hopes of its people. I know the Minister shares that too, and I look forward to hearing her answer some of the questions from honourable gentlemen and honourable ladies across this House, but particularly when it comes to funding going forward for PSNI, so that they can make the decisions that they know they need to make sure that policing is brought back at the forefront of domestic politics in Northern Ireland and crime continues to come down. Thank you, Sir Roger.
Minister.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to respond to this debate and to serve under your chairship, Sir Roger. And I congratulate the honourable member for North Down on securing this Westminster Hall debate, his first Westminster Hall debate, I also hope of many, on such an important and timely topic. And I welcome all of the comments from Middlesbrough, the members for Middlesbrough, South East and Cleveland, Upper Bann, North and South Antrim, Wokingham, and of the Shadow Minister. It is really important to be talking about safety on our streets, in our homes, at our workplaces, in our schools, wherever we are. Everyone deserves to feel safe, and that's so vitally important. And equality of safety goes alongside all the other equalities that we want to see. This government is supporting frontline policing levels across the country, putting the government on a track to start to deliver the pledge to boost visible neighbourhood policing. It's a key mission of this Labour government to take back our streets, to have safer streets. And it's a key mission in the draft Northern Ireland Executive Programme for Government as well. A priority is safer streets. And I think that's what we can agree on across the House. I would like to begin by paying tribute to the brave men and women who serve in the PSNI. and work tirelessly to keep the people of Northern Ireland safe. The commitment and bravery of the PSNI is shown every day across Northern Ireland. However, there are two examples which I think really vividly demonstrate their commitment and dedication. The terrible attack on Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell last year reminded us that there are still a small minority in Northern Ireland who wish to cause harm to those who serve. And most recently, the violent disorder this summer saw officers sustain serious injuries whilst ensuring the safety of others. In early August, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and I met with PSNI and Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service members in Belfast during that week of protest to offer our thanks to them in person and heard many stories of bravery. The Prime Minister has also met with injured PSNI officers. It was clear to us all that PSNI's response to this disorder was a testament to their dedication, their ability to deliver safety and security in Northern Ireland. And we owe all those who serve in the PSNI our gratitude. This government will continue to work alongside the Northern Ireland Executive to support the PSNI, and in response to the Shadow Minister, to continue to have ongoing conversations with the Chief Constable and other members of the PSNI as a matter of course. Recognising the unique security situation in Northern Ireland, the UK Government makes additional contributions to the PSNI through additional security funding, as has been mentioned. As we announced in the spending review last week, we have increased this funding for the PSNI for the financial year of 25 to 26, and they will be provided with £37.8 million in additional security funding. They were previously provided with £32 million a year, a level which had been in place since 2015 to 16. The increased funding this government has provided will provide the PSNI with the resources they need to tackle the threat posed by Northern Ireland-related terrorism in Northern Ireland, allowing them to continue to keep people safe. This government recognises the difficult financial position the PSNI faces, as has been outlined. However, policing is largely a devolved matter in Northern Ireland, and the PSNI's main budget is allocated by the Northern Ireland Department of Justice. Certainly.
Jim Shannon.
I think the honourable gentleman who introduced this and myself, we had a particularly difficult time about a year and a half ago where paramilitaries and a feud took place. There were special circumstances. The funding for our area had to be above and beyond. Now, police service were able to do that with extra police officers, with extra overtime to ensure that. But that only worked because the police had some resources. The point I'm trying to make, Mr. Chairman, is this, that without the resources, the extra resources in Northern Ireland with the special circumstances, then the police will be unable to police without that extra money.
I absolutely understand the point that the honourable member is making, and the need for more additional funding is very much understood. And that's why I was very glad that more money has been delivered to Northern Ireland in the budget last week. It was good news for Northern Ireland. Last week's budget delivered a record £18.2 billion for the Northern Ireland Executive in 25 to 26, the largest settlement in real terms in the history of devolution. This includes a £1.5 billion top-up through the Barnett consequentials for 25 to 26, with £1.2 billion for day-to-day spending and £270 million for capital investment. So what will be done with that money? It's for the Executive to set a budget for all Northern Ireland departments and for the Department for Justice to allocate funding to the PSNI. How that funding is used is an operational matter for the PSNI and for the Chief Constable. The estates of PSNI, so police stations, have been raised by the member for North Down. The allocation of that money and the way the money is allocated, and also the PSNI estate and police stations being open or not, is entirely an operational matter for the Chief Constable, who is accountable to the Northern Ireland Policing Board. Paramilitarism has been mentioned, and the effort to tackle paramilitarism is led by the Northern Ireland Executive's Tackling Paramilitary Programme, which was established after the Fresh Start Agreement. The programme is working to tackle the presence of paramilitaries through evidence-based early interventions, targeted law enforcement measures, and initiatives that provide direct support to help build safer communities resilient to paramilitarism. The UK Government provides 50% of the funding for the cross-executive programme for tackling paramilitary activity and organised crime, which is currently £8 million per year. As was announced in the spending review, this has been secured through to March 2026. One strand of this work is the Paramilitary Crime Task Force, the PCTF, a multi-agency task force which includes officers from the PSNI, the National Crime Agency and HMRC. Over the period from April 23 to March 2024, the PCTF made 107 disruptions, 83 arrests, charged and reported 115 people and conducted 175 searches. The PCTF seized drugs and with a street value of over £1.3 million and illicit tobacco with a street value of over £2.8 million, along with 41 firearms and weapons, of which 8 were explosive devices. The Executive Programme for Tackling Paramilitary Activity and Organised Crime has provided PSNI with £5.6 million in 2023-24 and the same 2024-25. PSNI's police numbers have been raised several times, and rightly so. A well-staffed and resourced PSNI is vital to the success and stability of Northern Ireland. I'm aware that the PSNI restarted recruitment earlier this year and that the Chief Constable has been speaking to the Department for Justice to discuss funding to allow this to continue. Recruitment and retention are absolutely vital to delivering effective policing. Policing in Northern Ireland, apart from national security, is a devolved matter, and police numbers are a matter for the Department for Justice and the Chief Constable. As of the 1st of October 2024, PSNI has 6,303 full-time officers. I'm aware that the Chief Constable aims to lift the officer numbers to 7,000 within 3 years. This will be challenging, but I understand he is speaking to the Department of Justice about this, and we will continue to support him. The Honourable Member will also be aware of the Executive's draft programme for government that was published in September, and I note that the programme's recognition that PSNI officer numbers are low and welcome the Executive's commitment to grow police officer numbers to 7,500 in line with the new decade, new approach. And as I have said, last week's budget delivered the largest settlements in real terms in the history of devolution, including that £1.5 billion top-up through the Barnett consequentials. This money is not ring-fenced, and the Northern Ireland Department of Finance will work with executive departments to allocate this money based on budget pressures. I welcome the fact that the data breach was raised by the member for Belfast East, the Right Honourable Member for Belfast East. In response to the August 2023 PSNI data breach, the PSNI worked closely with the Department of Justice in Northern Ireland to fully understand the cost implications of their response to this very serious incident. The UK Government granted an initial non-repayable reserve claim of £15 million after the data breach. This was communicated to the Department for Finance and intended to assist in addressing the challenges to the PSNI budget caused by the data breach. However, in February 2024, the Department of Finance confirmed that this funding was not required and PSNI costs could be absorbed within the NI budget, and no additional funding was required from the UK Government. But we continue to work together in ways like this to ensure that policing can continue. Certainly.
Thank you, Sir Roger. Would the Minister accept that that was in relation to the likely fine from the ICO, and the fine was greatly reduced, but there is no cover and there's no resource allocation for the level of compensation that will be due to the thousands of officers that were involved, and that figure is at £240 million?
I thank the member for raising this ongoing issue. I will need to conclude now, and to conclude by saying that the raising of ending violence against women and girls by the member for Upper Bann is absolutely welcome, and I totally agree that this must be a priority in policing. It has been demonstrated that the positive steps that Northern Ireland has taken to become a more peaceful and prosperous place is ongoing and reflects the commitment of communities from across Northern Ireland to build a safer place to live and work. The work of the PSNI, alongside other security partners, is a crucial component in the delivery of a safer Northern Ireland, and I'm delighted that this government has been able to increase the additional security funding provided to PSNI to allow them to continue to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to say thank you to all the members and the Minister and the Shadow Minister for being very supportive here today and outlining the different issues of right across the country where there's a lack of policing. I hope that the members from Northern Ireland have highlighted the serious issue that we have in Northern Ireland. We've over 1,000 police officers down, and that number isn't growing. And I believe that this debate will hopefully put pressure on the Northern Ireland Executive, also pressure on the Justice Department and the Justice Minister to come up trumps and deliver more policing for our overstretched PSNI, who we love and support, and they deserve this recognition of our strength behind them.
Order, order. Sitting stands adjourned.